Adam, we just got to the range. So let's imagine that our golfer, our Be Better golfer, is walking up here and they're just getting to the range. Normally, somebody had just said this to me yesterday. A guy called Laurie Montague said to me yesterday, he was like, they park in the same parking space, they go to the same spot, they talk to the same people, they do the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
How should we structure our practice that's actually going to help us improve when we go, say, okay, we have an hour to spend, and we want to actually be better at the end of that hour, rather than just going out there and like burning like 500 or 50 calories and then going home?
Yeah, well, I mean, my practice philosophy, there are 5 different types of practice.
Okay.
And so we have technical practice, which is what everybody knows. That's working on motion, maybe shoulder turn, maybe weight shift, something like that. I would always recommend that whatever you're working on is related to an impact fundamental, one of the 7 things that we talked about in the last video.
Sure.
So if you are just working on shoulder turn, and if I ask you what are you trying to improve, and they say shoulder turn, that's not good enough answer. If you say I'm working on ground contact, and you say that you're working on weight shift in order to achieve that, that's okay. That makes sense. That there's logic there. If you improve your weight shift or get your weight shift more forwards, the ground contact is going to move with it as well. So the movement that you're trying to change should relate to an impact fundamental. Otherwise, you're just doing it for aesthetics.
A lot of times people say, well, I'm trying to get the club to lay down here, but you would want them to be able to explain to you, like, okay, that's cool, but how is that going to help your impact in your mind? Like, what is the point of that?
Yeah, exactly. And lots of people, they can't give that answer other than, oh, I saw Dustin Johnson do it, or I read it in a magazine or something. And that's not a good enough answer, really, because lots of times people will be doing something that's actually counter to what they want to do. They might be trying to get more forward shaft lean, and yet they're a slicer, and that's just going to make things worse for them.
Gotcha.
So yeah, make sure it's relevant to what you're working on. So that's technical practice. Everybody already does that kind of stuff.
Yep.
The next phase of practice I do is called experimental, and that's skill work, the stuff that we looked at in the last video. So hitting toe, hitting heel intentionally. If you're not good at it to start with little chip shots, or even putting. I've had players I get them to hit 10 toes in a row while doing a putting swing, then 10 heels in a row doing a putting swing, and we build it up from there.
Sure.
So there's always a level that you can find that where it'll challenge you, but you're still learning. Then we've got the third type of training is calibration. So that would be going for the center, going for the sweet spot, or on the divot board, going for the yellow spot.
That's
so basically
95% of what people do when they practice.
And for me, it's only about 20% of practice, really. What you're doing there, you're looking for patterns in what I call the big 3. So we talked about 7 impact factors. But really, when you're on the golf course as a player, when you hit a bad shot, everybody listening here, or a tour pro, when you hit a bad shot, it's almost always lumped into a ground contact error, a face contact error, or a face direction error. Almost all of them. Those are the technical faults anyway. Now, obviously, you might strike a ball perfectly on the course, but hit it in the bunker because you picked the wrong club. That's a mental error. Okay, gotcha. So when I'm looking at people on the golf course, I separate into what are the technical errors, what are the mental errors. And like I said, technically, it's going to be a ground contact, or face direction error. So when you're doing calibration practice, you're hitting shots, and you're just noting down what was the worst thing in that shot. So I can hit a couple of shots for you now, and you'll hit some shots that you'll class as good. Sometimes can't even get any better. Very rarely, because no one strikes 0 on the sweet spot really, and no one hits holding ones all the time. But if I hit a shot here. So I would say the worst thing with that was the face. I left the face open at impact. Yeah, okay. Not awful. We can actually see it was 2 degrees open or something. Let's have a look. So the face to path was 1.3 open. I was a little into out. Okay. So again, you'd look at that and you might say it's 11.5 yards offline. That's not actually too far offline at 165. So there'd be some point where you would say, I won't class that as an error.
Right.
But at some point you will. So you determine that depending on your level. If you're a tour pro, that's an error. If you're a 10 handicap, that's a good shot. That shouldn't be an error. So I'm going to class that as an error. My face strike was decent. So we can actually see it was 7 millimeters toe. I would probably personally class that as an error. Face contact was a little bit poor. Ground contact for me there was okay. I'll take that as okay. So mentally, either mentally you note it down, right, or I've actually got a whiteboard there. You could write it down, or you could get your phone out and you could write it down on the phone what the issue was. Ground contact was okay.
You do this for every shot?
Yeah.
When you're doing this calibration, yeah.
So face contact, I'd say that was a slight error. You may even write down what it was. So I'll put a T for toe, and then face direction was right. So and then you start hitting more shots.
Are you just going to hit another shot, or are you going to make an adjustment based off of that? I mean,
I'm not going to try to make an adjustment
because it was just one shot.
Yeah, there'll be some times where you will. I mean, some point you get to a certain point in your skill where you can't not make the adjustment. Gotcha. But with calibration, you just practice. You just hit shots and see what happens. You're just noting down. I mean, if you are making adjustments and it changes the patterns, that's okay as well. So that one felt a tiny bit high on the face, but I like the direction. Nothing wrong with direction. Face strike felt good.
Yeah, 165 yards out, you got a 9-footer for birdie.
Actually, so this is one of the rare ones where I don't need to change anything. It's 0 millimeters on the face, so right on the sweet spot. 7 millimeters low, that's good. Yeah. You know, anywhere 7 to 10 millimeters low with an iron is really good. And direction was good, so I don't need to change anything for that. I'll hit another one. Hopefully, I don't keep flushing it. It's a good problem to have. Okay, there we go. Direction again, definitely. So yeah, you need feedback for this. So how do you know if you're striking the face? Use the spray. So you're getting that feedback each time so you can see if it's poor. How do you know if you're striking the ground in the right place? You can place a little T-bit on the ground, like right next to the ball, like that. And then when you're hitting shots, you'll see where your divot is, so you can see whether it's in a good place for you. How do you know direction? Well, obviously, you just take a look, right? But you can go up to the shot and see, okay, is it 10 yards away? You can pace
something that you do, Adam, on the range that I don't think I've heard any other coach do, which I think is so valuable. So if we're on like an actual range here, and kind of like aim point, show us what you do with your fingers to be like, okay, I can see kind of the tree where that landed on, even if we're just at the range, not in a screen.
Yeah, actually I've set up this projector so it's true to life. So if I look at that, I would say, okay, that's 2 fingers offline, 2 fingers to the right. So it's about 1.5 fingers.
And you know at like 165 yards how far away each finger is?
It's about 5 yards per finger, yeah. So that works out well. It's 1.5 fingers offline, and this thing says it's 8 yards offline, so it's pretty accurate.
So you see where it lands, you hold your hand out there and say, okay. Because on the range, sometimes I've noticed that sometimes on the range, it seems like it's really far away. Yeah. But then you walk up to it and you're like, oh, I feel like a 20-footer. It's like
exactly,
it's not as far because sometimes it seems like, oh, if it's not right on it, it seems way off. But it's actually not very far a lot of times on the range.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So the finger system is really good. And I would say a tour level shot is anything within 2 fingers either side. So a 4-finger spread is good. So lots of times I'll see players on the golf course and they'll hit a shot, it'll go in a bunker, and they go, oh, and they throw their club on the ground. And I say, well, where were you aiming? And they go, well, I was aiming at the pin. And I hold up my fingers and I go, you just hit it 2 fingers left. That's not a bad shot. You picked a sucky alignment. You picked a sucky target. You should have
sucker pin. Yeah,
aiming more towards the middle of the green, because that green is 6 fingers wide there. If you'd aim at the middle, you've got 3 fingers either side of it. And most greens, obviously it depends how far away you are from it, but most greens are about 6 fingers wide. So if you can hit it within a 4-finger area.
So for a 4-finger area from 150, did you say, or?
Well, with any club really, because obviously it scales out as you go to a longer club. 1 finger is about 7.5 yards then. Oh, okay. And as you go to a shorter club, 1 finger might only be 2.5 yards. So it kind of scales up.
But when we're talking about our like strokes gained accuracy,
yeah,
you know, from there, it's like, okay, you should be about as accurate as 4 fingers on either side of your target, regardless if it's 100 yards or if it's 300 yards.
Yeah, yeah.
the further away, the fatter your fingers are.
Yeah.
You know.
I do scale it down and up slightly. So I say with a driver, acceptable is 6 fingers, so 3 either side. With an iron, most irons about 2 fingers either side, and with a wedge, you're looking at a 3-finger area total, so maybe 1.5 fingers either side.
Great, yeah.
So it does get a little bit easier to control the direction when you have a lofted club, but it also, you know, in terms of trigonometry, it scales out nicely as well. So